Hi everyone, let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried to explain what you do to your family and friends and gotten a blank look? Or is fear holding you and your online business back right now? Now, if you answered yes to either of those, you're going to love this month's free newsletter. How do you get a copy? Head on over to writecom.com now. And by the way, if you want to make more money with your online business, you are going to love our coffee bean money making idea inside. So head over to Writecom, that's WRITECOME.com, and you'll find the newsletter waiting for you over there. Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to today's podcast episode from writecom.com. And today's podcast episode is entitled Work or Play? It's how you look at it. Now, how do you see the thing that you do? Is it work or is it play? You know, if I looked at the time I'm spending right now coming up with a podcast idea, recording that podcast, maybe doing a little bit of editing, putting on some music and stuff like that, and then launching that podcast episode. If I saw all of that as work, this would be a pretty tough podcast episode to record. Now, if I seen it as work, you would probably also sense it on your side too as well. You know, your little spidey sense would say to yourself, I don't think he's actually enjoying this. I don't feel like he's giving it his best. He just seems to be hurrying through this podcast episode. He doesn't seem to be enjoying it. And you would pick up that vibe on the other side. But when you think about it, both of those options are open to me at the start before I record this podcast episode. I can see it as work, or I can see it as play. You know, I can see it as a chore, as in, God, I have to record another podcast episode. I recorded one yesterday, now I have to do another one tomorrow. And I'm keep thinking of what I need to do over again and thinking, oh God, it's just drudgery. I have to do it again and again and again. There's no end to these podcast episodes because I'm seeing it as a chore. But if I reframe it, and I reframe it as fun, as play, well, it allows me to free myself up. It allows me to not take it as seriously as I would have. And, you know, I'll be taking it probably a lot more lighthearted, which means that I'm going to enjoy this podcast episode. It means that I am not going to worry as much of what maybe you might think on the other side, because whether this podcast episode could be listened to by 10 people or 10,000 people, the fact that I'm enjoying myself right now, the fact that I'm making this play, means that whether 10 people listen to it or 10,000 people listen to it, it doesn't matter to me. I'm having fun recording this podcast episode. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, you on your side, whatever you are doing right now, some days the work is going to seem like work. Some days you mightn't be able to make it seem like play. But how about maybe just trying to see if you could make it a little bit playful in one way? Now, one of the things that I have found was something I had read recently, it was actually an audiobook I had listened to recently, one by Thomas Sterner, which is called The Practicing Mind. And what he recommends you should do to try and maybe lighten up yourself and maybe make things more playful is to take yourself out of the past and take the future out of the equation as well as you are doing your work. You know, as I'm recording this podcast episode, I could lose myself right now thinking, who is going to listen to this podcast episode in the future? What are they going to think from me? Is this going to be a success? Is this going to be a failure? Am I wasting my time recording this podcast episode? And by me recording this podcast episode with my thoughts in the future, because I'm not present, I'm really not giving you the best of me. I'm not giving you my best ideas. I'm off in the future. Or again, if I look backwards right now as I'm recording this podcast episode, I could be thinking to myself, well, yesterday's podcast episode was a flop. We only had 5 listeners. So will this one be the same? You know, all the podcast episodes in the past don't seem to be getting any traction, and you know, maybe it's not worth me while doing this. Maybe I should give up on this podcast. And again, because I'm taking my mind out of the present moment, taking it into the past, how can I really record a great podcast episode for you? How can I give you my best content? How can I give 100% to myself in this episode by being either in the future or in the past? So as you know, as Thomas Sterner says, there is only really one time that we can take action in, which is the present moment. And By focusing on the present moment, you will probably find that whatever you're doing right now will seem a little more playful because you're not seeing it as a chore. You're not imagining if this thing is going to be a success, or you're not comparing it to the work you did yesterday. You're just taking it as what you're doing right now at the moment. So some things, as I said, some things are always going to be a chore. You can't take that out of it. But if there is a chance when you are doing something right now, whether that is a blog post, whether it's a podcast, a video, whatever, you have two options at the start. Think to yourself, do I want to see this as play, or do I want to see it as work? And the best work you're going to do, the most fun you're going to have, and the better enjoyment the people are going to have on the other side is when you take it as play, when you relax into it, when you just focus on the present moment, giving your best work and forgetting about it as a chore, and forgetting about the future and the past, and focusing on the one moment. So, work or play, it's how you look at it. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like more from the Writecome.com podcast, be sure to subscribe now for more tips, tricks, and ideas you can use to make more money from your words. See you in the next episode.